Okay, let's begin. Hello, everybody. My name is Max Goyzman. I'm with Peakhill Capital, Vice President of Financing. Peakhill Capital is a bridge CMHC construction lender. We do a lot of work with CMHC all across the country. And today you guys are joined because you must have heard about the changes at CMHC as it relates to MLI Select and their energy efficiency criteria. So I am joined here today by a good friend and partner of Peakhill's, PL Energy representative, Jayden Haywood. How you doing, buddy?
Hey Max, thanks for having me on. I'm doing good, thank you. Just like a lot of people across the country right now, navigating some of these changes and trying to just figure out what the rule shift means, and trying to kind of like talk people a little bit off the ledge as far as the impact that these changes are going to have.
That's amazing. Okay, so let me just refresh everyone's memory with what we're dealing with. So CMHC came out end of November with the following changes. And as background, they said, for the MLI Select product, energy efficiency commitments for new construction applications are assessed against the National Building Code and National Energy Code of Canada for Buildings, NECB, in brackets. Over time, these industry standards evolved to introduce multiple tiers of energy performance within each building category based off size and type. NBC Part 9 for smaller buildings and NECB Part 3 for larger, more complex buildings. Given recent adoption of the 2020 NBC and 2020 NECB by most provinces and territories, and to ensure maximized energy efficiency outcomes, it is important that the most recent standards be reflected within CMHC policies. So effectively, in order to qualify for CMHC's MLI Select program through energy efficiency, the goalposts have changed. So, for example, in order to achieve level 3, 50 points through energy efficiency on new construction, you will need to be minimum 60% better than NECB Tier 1. Um, that's for all buildings under Part 3. And under Part 9, it's 70% better than NBC Tier 1. Okay. And just to be clear, there are no changes to the current energy efficiency qualifying criteria for existing properties. This is only for new construction. And these new rules take effect September 30th, 2026. So, Jaden, why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, and
Yeah,
if you're
sure.
comfortable, share the secret sauce for our
Yeah,
audience here.
absolutely. So, Max was kind enough to give me a little bit of a warm intro. My name's Jayden Haywood. I'm one of the partners at PL Energy. We are an engineering firm with 17 years experience in retrofitting existing multifamily buildings and helping developers find the easiest, cheapest path forward to hitting their energy compliance standards. With the help of Peakhill Capital, we have done 650 CMHC applications over the last 2.5 years for close to $5 billion in both construction financing and refinancing of existing buildings. To Max's point, and a very important note that we want to highlight right now, nothing has changed with regards to existing buildings. So existing buildings will still be benchmarked based on their current energy consumption, and we still have to try to achieve 40% energy savings. And we have an excellent track record in identifying low cost, easy to implement measures that usually qualify for rebates and incentives. So that's the good news. To Max's other points, part of what we're going to try to address today is identifying the new baseline, because that is the new goalpost that developers in both Part 9 and Part 3 buildings across Canada need to be aware of. And then identifying the challenges and hopefully some opportunities in achieving the new performance metrics that we now need to achieve to get 50 points. Does that kind of make sense, Max?
It makes sense. I think a lot of the questions we're getting now is energy efficiency still worth it? Is it going to be too expensive? So,
Right. Yeah. And listen, these are great questions, and of course, there's always going to be a delta where it stops being worth it. So, what I'd like to do first and foremost is address probably the biggest elephant in the room when somebody sees 2015 National Building Code and they see it's jumped to 2020 National Building Code, one would assume that there is much higher energy compliance requirements that they have to hit. So effectively, 2020 National Building Code Tier 1 is almost identical to a 2015 National Building Code. So effectively, this often requires little to no additional construction costs. So again, Tier 1 2020 National Building Code and 2015 National Building Code are almost identical in terms of energy efficiency. So that's I mean, should give some people some peace of mind. So what we're really trying to address here is what are the different compliances to hit that new energy performance benchmark? So for part three buildings are low rise buildings, a lot of the missing middle, typically 50 units and below. We need to now be 70% above that baseline, above that 2020 baseline. That's effectively a 2015 baseline for National Building Code. And for the larger buildings, for the larger developers that are Part 9 developers, we need to be 60% better. So what we're really trying to solve for is that delta between where we are now, which is 40% above baseline, to 70 and 60% respectively. So what we want to talk about are financial optimization. I mean, what is the most cost-effective way to hit these energy measures? When I usually sit down with developers, I like to identify what are you doing already that hits these compliances. So most provincial building codes, surprisingly, meet a lot of these performance compliances that CMHC sets forth. So what I usually try to identify when I'm looking at preliminary plans for a large development or a small development, what are you doing all right already that you don't have to change? How can we capture the most amount of MLI select points without any additional construction costs? And what's the cheapest path forward to get to these new energy compliances? So the landscape is shifting. To Max's original point, this is what we're looking at. If you look at the old target letter, both Part 9 and Part 3 buildings were required to be 40% above National Building Code. And effective late September 2026, the shift looks like it's going to require a 30% jump in performance for low rise buildings and a 20% jump in performance for larger buildings. Again, to clear out a lot of the confusion and the smoke, the important takeaway here is that the baseline, being a 2020 National Building Code, is effectively going to remain the same as a 2015. So let's break down the numbers. I think for a lot of developers across the country, they want to say, how much more is this going to cost me? And to Max's original question, the question that I've gotten, 100 times over the last 2 weeks, is it still going to be worth it to pursue energy efficiency? So Max has probably introduced me in the past as a developer myself. I build infill missing middle multifamily with Peakhill's support. And so what I was able to do is break down my construction budget and provide some insights for those listeners right now that are Part 9 developers. So anything that's considered low rise. The financial overview that I provided is a 5,500 square foot missing middle development here in Toronto of a construction budget of 1.6 million. So what I'm trying to always tell people when we talk about these changes is when we look at the overall construction budget, not every line item is going to be affected by this change. We're essentially looking at energy upgrades that pertain to building envelope. So your wall assemblies, your above grade wall assemblies, windows, the R value that one would have in the roof. We typically look at heating and cooling systems, and we typically look at potentially the use of renewable energy. And when I say renewable energy, I'm talking about solar systems. Over the last 2 weeks, I've dealt with a lot of misconception that this is going to have a material impact on the overall hard cost construction budget. And what I have found by running some simulations through my pro formas and my construction budgets, typically the line items that are allocated to energy can be anywhere from 10 to 15% of your overall hard cost construction budget. And of that construction budget, our preliminary assessments are finding that there's an impact in between 3.8 and 5%. So as it pertained to my development of that $1.62 million hard cost construction budget, I have found the impact is going to be anywhere from $60,000 to $75,000 in additional costs. Now, these numbers are probably all going to be Greek, depending on where you are in your construction budget. And if you're, of course, a Part 3 developers, these numbers don't apply at all. The overarching theme that I'm trying to communicate right now is we are finding when the rubber hits the pavement a material impact of about 3.8 to 5% on construction budget. And for us, that's $60,000 to $75,000. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. It's a scary amount of money, especially if you are the only one picking up that bill. So let's quickly talk about why we have always been energy compliant. So across the country, there are 100 reasons why you would build to a certain energy efficiency. We are all here because we understand the financial benefit and the impact of attaining MLI Select financing, whether that's for construction financing or after your project is built. We have been able to see higher loan proceeds, lower interest rates, longer amortization periods, a reduction in your DSCR, an increase to your loan to value takeout. So there's a multitude of financing benefits by achieving this energy efficiency. And I think for the most part, everybody that's a developer in Canada is on board with that. But let's look at some other benefits. There's some unquantifiable benefits as well, like tenant satisfaction, tenant comfort, tenant retention, the ability to potentially charge more per square foot if you can market your building green. But there also seems to be lurking in the shadows the potential of Canada potentially implementing energy compliance within the next decade. And when I say that, we have some reason to believe, if we're going to follow some of our neighbors to the south, that there could be some penalties in place for developers that are not building with 60 to 70% above national building code. There could be some compliance penalties. There could be a mandate to reduce the consumption of greenhouse gas. So I always tell people you're future proofing your buildings. Yes, we see an added construction cost, but if we look at, for my example, and maybe for a lot of viewers that are part of this webinar right now, the advantage for us was a reduction in our debt servicing obligation. And for the extra $60,000 to $70,000 a year, we personally experience a debt benefit of about a $66,000 reduction in our annual cash flows that are just going to either principal or interest payments. So for us, it was a very simple math problem that we had to solve where we noticed a 12-month return on that investment with spending the extra money. But again, there is a multitude of benefits why you should at least entertain it. And I would be happy to, at no cost, have the conversation with any member of this webinar right now to see if it makes sense for your development.
Not to mention Jayden, that you get just from 50 points a 10% discount on your CMHC insurance premium.
Yeah, that's big. I mean, like I always tell people, Max, you and I have so many mutual clients, and the exercise is incredibly simple. Would you rather pay that money in an insurance premium, which is absolutely money out the window, in my personal opinion, or would you rather invest that into like hard assets at your asset, right? Like where is the money best invested? And almost without fail, 10 times out of 10, the money is better spent on your asset that you are owning for the long term, which is your purpose-built rental. So again, on the screen here is very high level benefits as it pertains to financing. But depending on where your development is across Canada, province by province, there's some other hidden gems that we can unlock here at PL Energy to help you identify and recognize and crystallize some other benefits. And that's kind of where I'm going with this next point. The rebates and incentives. Max, I think when you and I really started our relationship 2.5 years ago, we were very focused on energy compliance as it pertained to CMHC's MLI Select. And that's been, incredibly lucrative for all of the people that are here in this webinar right now. But there's been a lot of rebates and incentive programs that have either been brought to light for the first time. I know Ontario just launched the biggest one in Canada's history this calendar year. There's been federal incentive and rebates, and then municipal incentives and rebates, all geared toward energy efficiency. So, obviously, we don't have time to get into every single micro program and the minutia and the details of them. But simply put, if your building consumes cubic meters of water, cubic meters of natural gas, or kilowatt hours of electricity across Canada, and you are reducing them either for existing buildings or in new construction, there's likely a rebate, incentive, or credit that you can apply for. And our firm, which is like, a medium-sized engineering firm, we just hit $135 million in rebates, incentives, and credits. So I always encourage everybody, ask if there's rebates and incentives. Ask yourself, if my building is using one of these three energy metrics, does it qualify? It takes nothing to ask. When we see this daunting price tag, whether it is 60 or 75,000 or, potentially in the millions of dollars, depending on what you're building, I highlight this. You are not paying for it alone. There are federal and provincial rebates that are geared toward offsetting this capital cost. We all know that we live in Canada. We all know that Canada is very aggressive with its energy standards and its targets by 2030 and beyond. I would encourage the investigation, whether it's with a phone call with me. Sometimes your contractors can help you out with this question. Ask if there's rebates and incentives, because you don't have to do the heavy lifting alone. So we are seeing rebates in some provinces as high as 75% of the capital cost, depending on the energy measure that you're implementing to your new construction or retrofit. But typically, rule of thumb is 25 to 50% can be covered. Depending on the province, they can have super aggressive, super lucrative rebates and incentives. And again, if you have a really good relationship with your contractor, depending on where your development is, I encourage you to ask. They are usually sometimes well suited to provide some of that information, and ultimately they should be able to provide a lot of the specs and the materials and some of the preliminary information that we would need as an engineering firm to maximize those rebates. The one point I suppose I would highlight, there's typically two paths to securing rebates and incentives in Canada that I have found historically. And one of them is called the prescriptive path, which gives you a set dollar amount depending on the pieces of equipment or energy measure you're installing. And one of them is an engineered path. The engineered path is usually more laborious, requires more engineering hours, but typically and historically will yield higher rebates and incentives because it's hinged on an engineering study that takes into account baseline, predicted energy savings, and usually a more sophisticated measurement and verification process. Max, at the beginning of our webinar, you had asked, "What's the magic sauce? What's the secret bullet? What's the silver bullet?" I would say, listen, we certainly have a proprietary approach to energy modeling. Our philosophy has always been smarter modeling, controls versus construction, meaning you can buy your way to energy efficiency, or with some outside of the box thinking, in my opinion, and in our experience and track record, we can just model that same building different. So advanced energy modeling is what we call it at PL Energy. My business partner, whom a lot of you know, Conrad, has an accreditation which is called CBCP, which is a Certified Building Commissioning Professional. That designation allows us the ability to essentially make a very sound argument that without any changes required to major pieces of equipment, and again, that's your building envelope, your wall assemblies, your windows, without having to change your heating and cooling systems, your domestic hot water systems, your lighting, we believe that if that building is controlled more sophisticatedly with the use of AI, proprietary building automation systems, programmable thermostats, predictive weather forecasting, we believe that we have been able to make very sound arguments that we can hit those new energy thresholds with minimum costs and also help with the federal and the provincial government with rebates and incentives. So What's the secret sauce? We have spent the last 2 weeks running some, preliminary energy models and looking at hitting 60 and 70% above baseline. And more importantly, being a developer myself, looking and examining the impact that that's going to have on my construction budget. And we're pretty optimistic that this new energy change that CMHC is proposing, that's coming into effect in about 10 months from now, um, will not cripple our construction budget and our pro forma. So
So,
we
so
believe,
first,
sorry, Max.
sorry to interrupt. So, will I need a different heat pump, or is the heat pump I have now going to be okay? Is it just through advanced controls? Like
I
specifically
think,
for one system, can you speak to what that would look like?
well, I'm glad you brought that up. I think, and I can say almost with a very high degree of certainty, that the federal government is looking to remove its reliance on greenhouse gas and fossil fuels. So I can say with a very high degree of certainty, air source heat pumps will likely be mandatory in hitting this new tier 5 energy compliance. Tier 5 is what we call net zero ready. So not quite net zero, but net zero ready. And net zero ready is hinged on the removal of greenhouse gas. So let's isolate air source heat pumps as a form of heating and cooling. If our assumption is right, which air source heat pumps will be mandated, yes, effectively what I'm saying is instead of buying the highest efficiency and the most expensive heating and cooling systems, we believe with the implementation of controls, automation system, and AI, we can make your baseline air source heat pump meet the energy compliance that's required to hit 50 points.
Got it.
The other measure, Max, that we're seeing is, again, we've run some preliminary energy models. I'd be happy to share with this webinar, offline, one-on-one. We've ran some predictive energy models with part 3 and part 9 buildings. We're also examining the impact of the potential use of double pane to triple pane windows. We're trying to avoid them at all costs right now because it does seem to have a pretty material impact on construction budgets, but that could be coming down the pipeline, and potentially air source heating systems for domestic hot water.
And what about the building envelope? I mean, I'm a little bit ignorant of how this works, just as a lender, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be so
So,
straightforward, would it?
so like building envelope is province by province specific, depending on like the weather zone that you're in. Like for example, the Ontario Building Code mandates a minimum R value for your building envelope, which is like your above grade walls. Typically, that has always fallen in line with National Building Code. This is no different. So the National Building Code, again, mirroring 2015 national or yeah NBC, the R value seems to be constant. Tier 5 2020 National Building Code, or 70% or 60%, will likely require an increase to R values. So, for example, in Ontario Building Code, builders are usually building to an R21, and that meets and in some cases exceeds National Building Code. We believe that that's going to be beefed up. Now, we are trying to explore the cheapest measures. So it's probably important to recognize that a lot of new construction are going to be no longer keeping any of the existing retaining walls because we're seeing that there's an HST implication there. That's a completely separate topic, but what we are finding is that if people are building all new constructions and they are going with non-combustible, that you can usually find some pretty cost-effective non-combustible spray foam solutions that meet that new R value. As a builder that's done it the expensive way with exterior 2-inch rigid board, we're advising a lot of our clients to avoid that at all cost if possible. And we're in the midst of trying to explore some very cost effective measures. I wanted to highlight, Max, really quickly. Last week, I was in a meeting with the deputy chief building official at the City of Toronto and the senior manager of the planning review at the City of Toronto. And if Toronto is a driving force for new building and construction practices. It's very, very cool what we have coming down the pipeline as far as new building materials, building science, and high performance new construction that will be allowed in terms of both building permits on the municipal level and, of course, will equal higher efficiency on the CMHC level. So, look, historically, increases to R value and increases to building envelope have been a very expensive line item. I'm very optimistic that over the next 9 months, as this program comes into effect, the cost of building materials is going to continue to come down, and Canada on a whole will see some very unique building sciences come out of this change and hopefully drive down construction costs. So, right now, it may seem daunting, but if I told you that triple pane windows in 6 months from now, we're going to somewhat be in line with double pane windows, that price tag becomes smaller and smaller. So what we do at PL Energy, we're trying to close that gap and bridge the gap between the high cost that we're seeing and hopefully the financial benefit on the back end.
I had a question um,
Yeah,
from the audience. This is related to larger buildings, more complex buildings, but do you know like where geothermal fits into all this, or should we get into that?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, we I think we're working with two of like the largest developers or the developments that are happening in Canada right now. Both developments are 3,500 units and they're both in southwestern Ontario. Both developers are in the midst of implementing or at the very least exploring geothermal. So, as an energy modeling firm and a professional engineering firm, what we are doing is we run simulations to factor in geothermal heating and cooling. That significantly reduces a development's need for kilowatt hours, electrical consumption, and can absolutely qualify for federal, provincial rebates. And what that does, I mean, like, look, broad stroke, geothermal reduces the need for heating in the frigid months of December, January, February, and March by tapping into the temperature that's warmer than above ground, and it does the exact same in the summer. Provides cooling for free or reduced cost in the summer months. So whether that's with domestic hot water, whether that's with a closed loop hydronic system used for heating and cooling, geothermal for larger buildings is a very, very cool, unique, forward thinking. It's called renewable energy measure that qualifies for rebates and can absolutely catapult you into the CMHC requirements for
You're going to
energy
way
consumption.
exceed your requirements with geothermal,
Pardon me?
right? You'd way exceed the CMHC MLI select requirements with geothermal for energy efficiency, right? You
Yeah,
wouldn't
I'm
have
going
to
to say
worry about it.
like with confidence, it will have a material impact in a positive way. If your site is examining geothermal, albeit somewhat pretty expensive, it is an incredible option and opportunity to hit your full 50 points in the MLI Select, qualify for rebates and incentives, and you would be among a very forward thinking small group of developers in Canada that are using that technology. But yeah, it's the way of the future. Geothermal is absolutely an incredibly innovative energy measure.
Okay. Okay, we can move on.
Okay. Um, we talk about the benefits of working with a experienced energy modeling firm. There are a handful of very, very good energy modeling firms across Canada. Where I think we potentially have a bit of an advantage is our ability to maximize rebates and incentives. I spoke earlier about taking the hard route or the harder route to get to a higher dollar amount for rebates and incentives. We're incentivized to hand out the most amount of money for both federal and provincial rebates and incentives, sometimes from the utility, sometimes directly from the clients. But what I am always encouraging Peakhill clients and members of the Peakhill ecosystem is control your building. Don't spend your money on construction. So we already know all the benefits of unlocking the financial financing returns. We know that there's rebates and incentives. We know that there's upside to building a better asset class. And I think the sooner that we can get ahead of this problem, or the sooner that we can get ahead of what's coming down the pipeline in September, the better equipped we as a collective will be. Both Max, us at PL Energy and you as the developer. And I think that yeah, with like a holistic approach to the problem, I'm very confident of a few things. One, it's not going to have a catastrophic impact on your pro forma. Two, I can say with confidence, I believe that it's still worth it. And three, let's take advantage of some of these rebates and incentives that are out there while they are out there. It doesn't cost you money to secure rebates and incentives. You're not obligated to use them. You're not penalized if you don't. And remember, if we help you secure rebates and incentives, you can use them with whatever contractor you like across the country. So I'm very confident that between Max and myself, this change is not nearly as daunting as we've seen some in the past handed down by CMHC. And the good news is we have 9 months as a collective to figure this out together.
So I think something important is that I hear from a lot of clients who don't use big firms specializing in this. Sometimes they'll approach one of the engineers already working on their project to do the modeling. What do you say about that? Is that they won't have the information about the rebates? Would their modeling be different? I get a lot of that feedback. Is that, oh, the engineer that worked on my project is doing the modeling, he's going to get me the attestation. Is it more important now to use a different a professional firm, or what kind of risks do you run in doing that?
In fairness, Max, I want to be very clear and transparent. Energy modeling is a fairly standardized engineering discipline. I don't think it really takes an insane level of sophistication to spit out an energy modeling report. It can be done on two different softwares predominantly. Where I think the difference is right now, given the landscape, as a professional engineering firm that has commissioning professionals, P-Engs on staff, certified energy techs, and actual developers ourselves, I think that there would be a benefit to those listening to at least entertain a conversation with a professional engineering firm versus potentially somebody that doesn't carry the P-Eng accreditation. I think now more than ever, like look, energy modeling is a very, very low cost line item on your construction budget. It's negligible in the grand scheme of things. If
No, but
you're
I'm talking
able
about
to,
the recommendations that the energy or the engineer would make, including what kind of upgrades you need to make. Like, is there a big difference between what you would recommend versus somebody else?
absolutely. I mean, you and I can probably pull on 20 different case studies where a client of yours has come to us. They said, here's an energy model. The measures that they've recommended were way too expensive. It didn't work. We were able to, and we have a great track record of identifying more cost-effective solutions that qualify for rebates. Look, I'm certainly not the biggest developer in Canada by any means, but everything that we look at, we look at the impact on pro forma. We looked at the impact on your financing, on your takeout or your construction financing. If I wouldn't recommend it to you, it just means that I wouldn't do it myself. Um, Again, let's control the major energy systems. Let's not just spend our money on constructing it. Yes, for the extra dollars that you're going to spend with a professional engineering firm, it is more than made up for when somebody can find you more cost effective energy solutions. And I honestly believe, Max, the silver bullet right now is our approach, PL Energy's approach to smart systems and automation and controls and AI and predictive weather patterns. Like that's the future of smart buildings. And CMHC accepts our energy modeling reports, and it's going to save you money as a developer, both on your hard costs and on your operation expenses. Let's get you the 50 points in the cheapest way possible.
Okay. So we don't really have, you want to move into Q&A? I mean, we don't really have any questions really that are worth talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
Because some asked about specific within BC, or you want to get into the provinces, or should we talk about that offline?
Yeah. You want me to close this down or just keep this screen up? It's up to you.
No, there's not many questions on it, unless you want to go province by province.
To be honest with you, I don't. Just because
Okay.
like it's very laborious, and the minutia of each province. Like I'm sure they'll probably make a mistake. What I can say is this: we at PL Energy, we have. I always joke around with a lot of the people that are probably on this webinar. We keep a wing in our office just of engineers that sit there in front of their computers, navigating changes to the energy programs, submitting the engineering documents to maximize returns. It's a full time job. Keeping our thumb on the pulse with the programs and the changes to the programs and the rebates, it's a full time job. They vary province by province. Some provinces are more lucrative. Some provinces have gas rebates, water rebates, and electricity rebates. Some provinces don't. And it changes province by province. So every one of your clients or every one of these Peakhill clients and anybody in the Peakhill um, you know ecosystem is always welcome to engage with me and our team. We'll have a no cost, no obligation phone call. Let's explore what's potentially out there. And if it's worth pursuing for you, it's worth pursuing for us.
Okay, I think um, we might give everyone some of their time back. But if you have specific questions about certain provinces, you should definitely reach out to Jayden or PL Energy directly.
Yeah, I'll just
But
get my
really, what it is you got to connect your clients with the professionals. So, say you're a mortgage broker, or if you're the owner developer, just speak to the professional. Get their opinion. Okay.
yeah. It usually an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure, as they say. So the sooner, I do believe right now, Max, you and I have had a terrific couple of years dealing with developers sort of in the latter stages of their development. This is not any kind of like cautionary tale, or I'm not trying to like instill any kind of like fear by any means, but get an energy modeler or somebody that is aware of everything we just talked about involved sooner than later. The sooner you can get somebody involved that knows what they're talking about, it will save you costly revisions to your drawings. It'll save you a ton of time if you need to resubmit for permit. It should be able to help you proactively secure rebates and incentives. But look, engage with an energy modeling company that has their kind of focus on everything, the bigger picture, pro forma implications, rebates and incentives, cost to the construction budget. How can we optimize for CMHC? How can we optimize for building permit? Um, so yeah, I think that hopefully our track record, along with what we're doing, like exceptionally well at Peakhill Capital, will continue to transpire in 2026.
Okay. Well, Jaden, thank you as always. Always a pleasure. Remember, these rules don't come into effect until September 30th, 2026, so you can submit as is under the existing guidelines until then. There's a grace period. So again, yeah, just get in touch with Jaden. We will be sending a recording around, so don't worry about taking notes. That will be sent around. So thank you, everyone, Jaden. I'll see you later.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Max and Peakhill Capital. Thank you.